When God goes silent. Words. Allow 1450. Runtime. EU10:11 min at 1:35 WPM. There is a particular kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a door that won't open, like a phone that never rings, like months becoming years and the years carrying no answer, just more waiting, more wondering, more of the same ache you've been bringing to the same prayer for longer than you can remember. Most of us know this silence. Some of us are living inside it right now. And the thing about this kind of silence is that it doesn't stay neutral. The longer it lasts, the more it starts to feel like something. Not just quiet, but like evidence. Evidence that you've been overlooked. That you matter less than you thought. That the God who moved mountains in the stories you've read is somehow not moving in yours. We don't say it out loud, usually, but somewhere underneath the faith we carry in public is a quieter thought. Maybe I've been forgotten. This is the story of 4 people who had every reason to believe that, and what they found on the other side of the silence. Job was a man the Bible describes in terms reserved for almost no one else. Not merely good, blameless, not merely religious, the finest human being of his entire generation, and then everything was taken. His children, his wealth, his health. Gone in events so sudden and so total that the only honest word for what happened is catastrophe. And then, silence. Job cried out. He argued, he questioned, he pushed back with a directness that still unsettles people who read it today. He wasn't politely suffering. He wasn't performing quiet acceptance. He demanded a response. He said, in effect, I want to speak to whoever is responsible for this, and I want an answer. For chapter after chapter, nothing came back. What Job could not see from inside the furnace was that his questions, the raw, unfiltered, furious questions of a man who felt completely abandoned, were being heard, were being kept, were in ways he had no access to, becoming part of something larger than his own suffering. Job's silence was not abandonment. It was the condition under which something unprecedented was allowed to happen. The silence was not empty. It only looked that way from inside. He could not see where any of this was going. Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers sold him. Not abandoned by strangers, by family, the people who were supposed to protect him. And then the years in Egypt, first as a slave in a foreign household, then as a prisoner for a crime he didn't commit. Accused, forgotten, left. 13 years. 13 years with no word from the God of his fathers. No vision, no voice, no visible indication that any of this was going anywhere at all. If Joseph felt forgotten, it would have been reasonable, it would have been human. But underneath that silence, something was being assembled. The language he learned in Potiphar's house, the administrative skills, the cultural fluency, the particular kind of patience that can only be developed in a place you cannot leave, the ability to hold complexity without collapsing, the interpretation of dreams, practiced in a prison before it was ever needed in a palace. Every single thing Joseph would need to save a civilization from famine was being fitted into him during the years when nothing appeared to be happening. He couldn't see it. The silence had covered it. But the work was already underway, and the world outside had no idea. Esther's story is unusual among all biblical accounts for one striking reason. God is never mentioned by name, not once. In an entire book of the Bible, no divine voice, no angel, no burning bush, no vision, just a young woman. An older cousin who had raised her, a king who couldn't sleep one night, a series of ordinary events that, taken individually, look exactly like coincidence. Taken together, they look like choreography. A law passed at the precise wrong moment, creating the exact crisis that would require exactly the response that Esther was positioned to give. A sleepless night producing exactly the memory that needed surfacing. An invitation extended at exactly the right hour. Not one piece of this story required a miracle in the conventional sense. Every piece of it required that the ordinary machinery of human life run exactly as it needed to run, which is, quietly, its own kind of miracle. Esther's story doesn't say God was silent. It says God was invisible. Those are not the same thing. Hannah prayed the same prayer year after year. She wanted a son. And year after year, in a culture that attached a woman's entire worth to her ability to become a mother, the answer didn't come. Her grief became the texture of her daily life. The people around her didn't know how to hold it. Her husband loved her and couldn't fix it. And the silence stretched on. Until finally, at the temple in Shiloh, she prayed in a way she never had before. Not composed, not structured, weeping without sound, lips moving, nothing coming out, so completely undone that the priest watching from across the room assumed she was drunk. That image matters. Her desperation had passed beyond the point where most people stop. She had been stripped of every performance, every version of faith that still carried dignity with it. She had arrived at the absolute end of herself, and it was precisely there, in that place, that the answer began. Not because she finally said the right words, not because she had earned it through years of endurance, but because the silence had formed something in her that couldn't have been formed any other way. Samuel, the son who would anoint Israel's first 2 kings, was born from that silence. 4 lives, 4 silences. 4 different eras, different circumstances, different shapes of suffering and waiting, and a single pattern underneath all of them. In every case, God's silence was not absence. It was preparation. It was the part of the process that happens underground before anything surfaces, the part that, from the inside, looks like nothing is happening, because nothing is yet visible. We have a word for this in the natural world. We call it winter. Winter is not failure. It is the necessary condition for spring. The ground looks dead, nothing appears to grow, but beneath the surface, root systems are deepening. Water is being stored, structures that will be needed later are quietly forming. What emerges in spring can only be as strong as what developed in winter. In the cold, in the dark, when no one was watching. We don't accuse winter of abandoning the tree, but we accuse the silence of abandoning us. And perhaps, not without difficulty, not without the grief still being completely real, perhaps the silence we've been living inside is not what we thought it was. Not punishment, not evidence of diminished value, not the absence of a God who stopped caring. Perhaps it is the part of the process we cannot see yet. Some of you have been waiting a long time, not days, years. You've carried the same prayer past the point where it felt reasonable to keep carrying it. You've watched other lives resolve while yours stays open. You've done what you were supposed to do, and the silence has not broken. I won't tell you. I know when it will. What 4 lives across thousands of years seem to say is this: Job was answered, Joseph was positioned, Esther was prepared, Hannah was remembered. None of them could see it while they were inside it. None of them knew the silence was doing something. They only knew it hurt, and it lasted, and it felt like nothing was happening. But something was happening. God's silence is not God's absence. And if yours hasn't broken yet, it hasn't broken yet. But you are not forgotten.